Well, I recognize this is the last talk before lunch, so I will be brief. I don't want to hold you from your lunch. The topic that we have been given to speak about is deriving value from design. And I'm going to give you the architect's take on this, and Andrew Covell is going to give you the quantity surveyor's take on this. And we'll leave you to judge how collaborative we have been. Economists will tell us that it is only really in the field of invention and design that you can create wealth from just thinking. And we can see some examples of that. I'm sure that Damien Hirst spent a lot of time thinking about those dots before applying the paint. A lot of paint, I think you'll agree, a lot of dots. Consequence, it's worth £215 million. Prince, we are told, left an estate valued at $300 million from thinking about music. Sir James Dyson, I understand, has a personal wealth of £3 billion, and that's from just thinking about suction. So, what do architects do to create wealth? We have a very simple equation. When any client comes to a competent, skilled architect, we should be looking at how we take their brief and in their language, their business, we increase value. To that, we add reducing cost. How do we increase value and at the same time reduce cost? It's a very simple equation, and architects are not well known for our strength when it comes to mathematics, and that's about the level of equation that we can handle. What I can say for those of you who want to go on to the next stage is that this never, ever equals cheap and nasty. Good value, low cost does not equal cheap and nasty. So in my practice, let me tell you how some of our clients assess value. We do a lot of retail work, particularly at the moment we're doing a lot of motor retail work, and our motor retail clients will say to us that their customers drive past their forecourts at maybe 60 miles an hour, and there's no way that they can see the cars that are parked there for sale. And they certainly can't see what is happening inside the building. And therefore, the building itself has to communicate the brand values of that motor dealership. And at this point, the building converts itself from being a simple enclosure in which activities happen into part of the marketing budget, part of the sales budget. And I can give you some examples, if you ask me over lunch, about where the cost of the building becomes irrelevant because of the marketing and the sales function that it's performing. If we look at universities, another sector where we're busy, here this is the Students' Union that we designed for Bath University. Universities are in actually quite a similar position to the motor retailers, although they might not choose to acknowledge it, in that they are seeking the best and the brightest students from around the country, around the world. They are seeking to encourage the strongest and most innovative professors from around the world to join their universities to carry out research. They want buildings that not only provide a function, but also communicate something about the strength and the optimism and the forward-lookingness of that particular establishment. They need a building that communicates brand. Building here that you may well recognize, this is Lakeshore, designed by Ferguson Mann Architects for Urban Splash. And by golly, do Urban Splash understand the added value that design creates in the sales price of their apartments and in the rental value. They are past masters at knowing about value. In fact, it's the second slide that we've had from Urban Splash this morning. So, on the left-hand side of our equation, we have understood pretty simply that good design increases value. Let's look at it the other way around now, about cost. If I have a client, and the client comes to me and says, John, could you design me a car? Come back in a week's time, see what your ideas are. You know, I would be very tempted to get me red pens out. draw some curvy lines. It's going to have a big engine and it's going to have 2 seats. And I go back a week later and they say, well, lovely, lovely sketch. But actually, that is of no value to me, because what I didn't tell you was that I would actually find valuable something that's economical, something that is adaptable, something that is durable. Can you change what you've already designed? Can you value engineer it towards something like that over there? Of course, that is a completely impossible task. When we take a brief, be it for a car or a building, we need to know on day one, what is it that that client finds valuable? A couple of our buildings down here. For the bottom right-hand corner, this is a top-end global engineering company, and they wanted a building that communicated something about their high-end precision engineering to their customers, to their investors, to their potential staff. So this is actually quite an expensive building in construction terms. BAM are about to build it, and I've seen Jeff here. I haven't seen your bottom line yet, Jeff, but I expect it's quite an expensive building. And suddenly, if we took that design to one of our other clients, IKEA in the bottom left-hand corner, and said, "Ta-da, how would you like a nice silver one?" They would say it doesn't meet our brand requirements because A, it's too expensive, and B, it doesn't communicate value and economy. So in all of these examples, we can increase the value by understanding what it is the client aspires to. For this client, they were looking for a back office facility. They wanted something that was economical to build, durable, and adaptable throughout the life of the building. It had to be low cost for 60 years. It had to accommodate change that they knew would happen frequently over its lifetime. That was what they identified as being valuable. From this morning's talk, incidentally, this is a off-site prefabrication on-site assembly building built in 25 days. So we can see that in terms of cost, you can also say that good design reduces cost as well as adding value. So let's just pull together those bits of the equation. On the left, we've said increased value. Those are going to be topics like improving brand reinforcement. They're going to be to do with attracting people. They might be customers, they might be investors, they might be staff. Enabling adaptability is very desirable, very valuable to some clients. And environmental benefits, most clients are going to benefit from that in terms of reduced running costs throughout the life of the building. Interestingly, these are all qualitative concepts. Qualitative concepts, not only difficult to say, but also quite difficult to measure. If you look at the Apple stores that we see around the country, how do we know how much extra footfall there is as a result of the design of those buildings? Difficult to assess. Potentially hugely valuable. We saw that from James Dyson's point of view, he has applied design to vacuum cleaners, and it's worth $3 billion. That's where the big value added comes from, and the qualitative aspects of design. But we can also reduce cost. We can look at lower material costs, we can look at smaller buildings, we can eliminate waste, and we can go for faster construction. Those are going to achieve relatively modest sums. You might say 5–10% on the cost of the materials. You might say 5–10% on faster construction. If you have a smaller building, it might actually reduce its value. These are quantitative, which makes them much easier to measure, but in aggregate, they are less likely to achieve the big sort of change in the value equation than the qualitative issues. Never cheap and nasty. Cheap and nasty is second rate, it's shoddy, it's low grade, and whatever other derogatory term you might choose to put in there. And yet it's very easy. All of us in this room, I am sure, have had people come to us and say, I know you need to make some savings on that building. Here's a slightly cheaper cladding material. Here's a slightly cheaper roofing material. Here's a cheaper heating system. What we know is that they'll all go wrong pretty quickly. They'll all be expensive to maintain. And in the end game, they will ultimately be very expensive. So that is not where value lies. So, Andrew, from my perspective, an architect's perspective, I would say that deriving value from design means maximum value for lowest cost. It's a qualitative and quantitative assessment. And it never means cheap and nasty. Thank you. Pass over to Andrew.
think my talk to you today is proof positive of the need to attend all the invites that Andrew Carpenter sends out, because I didn't go to the meeting where they decided who was going to speak, and I think Andrew thought it would be a bit of sport if he put an architect and a QS together and asked them to talk about value and design. I am even more acutely aware that I am what stands between you and lunch. I thought about giving you 40 PowerPoint presentations of cost models and graphs, but I decided not to go down that route. So, when a client comes to us and say they want value for money, it's important to understand what they actually mean and where they're coming from. Are they talking about the short term, the lowest capital cost? In my opinion, that's the wrong approach. Initially low costs tend to lead to longer term rising costs, a point our previous speaker made. However, if they're talking about the long-term lowest cost, there might be an initial increase in cost, but hopefully a more steady state thereafter. So the former, oops, got too fast, the former being a bad thing and the latter being what we aspire to do. But what is their perspective of value? It will mean different things to different people. Do you, as the design team, understand what that means? Value to Apple is a very different thing to other clients. Value to them is all about building the brand. Their shop is about as much building the brand as it is selling things. You know an Apple store when you walk past it, even if it doesn't have the big Apple logo on it. The value that they put on the products, the materials they use, is significantly different. They are happy to spend the money on that value. You contrast that with another example from the retail sector, Poundland. Poundland is just about selling stuff. If they could get away with selling it in a tent, they probably would, because it has the fixtures and fittings have no real value to them. It's functional purpose. Two very similar environments, two very different perspectives on value. There is no good turning up to Apple and giving them the Poundland design, and vice versa. So value management, value engineering, two terms often used together, but fundamentally different. The most important point, if you wait until the tenders come back over budget, you've probably missed the point of value management. And everyone has in the design team, including the contractor, they have a role to play in the process. Use value management as a tool to test the design. Check with the client, is what you're producing what they want? There may be things they thought they wanted until you tell them how much they cost. There may be things they thought they couldn't afford. So use it as a tool. And it needs to be embedded in the project. There's no point doing value management on day one and going, well, that's that done, tick. Move on to the next thing. Keep coming back to it. Keep checking the register. And I think it's fair to say that value engineering done at the start of the project will generate more savings than if you wait till you're in construction. The latter approach, in my opinion, is cost cutting and tends to often lead to longer term cost. Now there's a possibility the next couple of images have been through the Photoshop, but they hopefully demonstrate the point. I think this is what the architect calls preserving the illusion of vertical circulation. This one. Oh, you actually wanted to access your balcony? Well, we didn't allow for the door, that's an extra. And my personal favorite, well, it is a two-bedroom extension. As I say, maybe Photoshop has been at work, but these are the sorts of things that can happen if you wait until your tenders come back and then you're going through and you're calling it value engineering. It is not value engineering, it's cutting cost. I wanted to close, and I couldn't resist doing a few equations. For many clients, it's all about the return on investment. It goes by different names, rate of return, return on investment, payback. But fundamentally, they're answering the same question. How much is this particular developer or owner-occupier will the project make? So even if costs are rising, if the return can stay the same or improve, the project may still be viable. You may not need to reach for the swinging axe. But please remember the reverse is true. Even if costs are going down, if value is going down as well, then potentially the rate of return is dropping. So as an example, and I promised a couple of equations, If you've got a project that costs £900,000 but that's worth £1 million, you've got a return on your investment of 11%. If costs rise to 950, your return drops to 5. Now, if you're borrowing the money to finance that project at 6%, there's not much point carrying on. However, if by introducing additional changes you can improve the value to 1.1 million, even though you've increased cost, your rate of return on investment has actually increased. So you have a viable project still. So it's not necessarily the end of the world if costs are rising, if value can be increased. So to conclude our joint presentation, and I should stress we actually did our slides independently and then came together, so it was a slightly odd thing, but we've both concluded that whilst value means different things to different people, the value is not necessarily about the cost of the building, it is just about the end product. Good design can equal good value. It doesn't have to mean cheap and nasty. It's usually, or at least often, about the return. And in the nature of collaboration in constructing excellence, for once, the architect and the QS have just agreed on something. Thank you.